Welcome to the Maximize Business Value podcast, brought to you by Mastery Partners, where our mission is to equip business owners like you to maximize your business value and achieve the exit of your dreams, whatever that means to you. With insights gained from over 100 business transactions, we share real-world strategies, lessons, and expert advice to help you build long-term, sustainable value in your business. Each episode is hosted by one of our Mastery certified partners. They're seasoned experts who've helped countless business owners navigate the complexities of growth, scaling, and building value. They bring first-hand experience, actionable insights, and a passion for helping you build a business that thrives. So let's dive in.
This episode is the second of a two-part release. To hear part one, follow the link below. Thank you for listening to the Maximize Business Value podcast.
So walk us through what enterprise value actually means. So when, a business owner hears that their company is worth $5 million, they think it really should be worth $8 million. What are the drivers that create the difference between a $5 million company and an $8 million company, and as it relates to enterprise value?
Okay. Well, I think how I would interpret that question is a couple things going on here. So I'm going to explain some terms, because terms in this space, when you're talking about the values of companies, are used and sometimes are very confusing to business owners. So let's start with the basic terms of equity value. So when we're talking about equity value, we're talking about the value of the stock of the business owner's company, or the member units if it's an LLC, whatever the case may be. And this would be
a number that they would find on their balance sheet. Is that right, Ralph?
No. So equity
perfect.
Value is something that, again, the value of your company is not necessarily linked with anything that you'll see on your books and records. Accounting records are recorded at historical cost. So when a person looks at their balance sheet, it's not the idea of, well, I've got 10 million in assets and 8 million in liabilities, and my retained earnings and capital stock balances are 2 million. And so as a result, my company's worth 2 million. Well, no, that's a historical cost number. That's basically what's left in the business of retained profits that haven't been distributed, and maybe capital amounts that have been put into the business by the business owner. But those are basically historical cost numbers. What your balance sheet essentially tells you is what the cost of your assets were and how much is sitting in cash, receivables, and balances on the balance sheet, undepreciated assets, and how those assets were financed through unpaid payables, accrued expenses that haven't been paid, bank financing that's on the balance sheet, and ultimately, again, undistributed profits that are retained in the company.
Yeah. Excellent. That's good clarity there.
So as far as equity value goes, the fair market value of equity and equity value would be the market value of the stock of the company, taking all of the assets and liabilities with it. Market value of invested capital would be the market value of all the investment holders. So that's fair market value of equity and the fair market value of debt. So if you've got $1 million line of credit and a $2 million long-term note, and you've got $3 million in interest-bearing debt on the balance sheet, and you've got, let's just say, $5 million equity value, then 5 plus 3 is $8 million market value of invested capital, and compared to a $5 million equity value. Now, when we go from market value of invested capital up to enterprise value will refer to the value of the underlying business operation, the enterprise itself. That might be devoid of other assets on the balance sheet besides just interest-bearing debt. So that would be the value of the company debt-free, but also perhaps maybe with removing some cash balances if there's excess cash. Maybe removing some loans receivable that were lent to the shareholders that they took money out of the corporation and structured it as a loan. Or perhaps non-operating assets, we call them in the appraisal world. Maybe the business owner has a personal boat on the books. It's not really an operating asset that's going to be sold with the company.
No, that never happens, Ralph.
No. We're not giving the boat away free. So ultimately, those other assets and items in the balance sheet come out of that market value of invested capital number and get adjusted back to what we'll call enterprise value, which is essentially just this value of the underlying business operation that the corporate shell that owns the company is holding.
Okay. All right. So, given all of that deep explanation, what are the drivers that create the difference there? Like, where does the difference lie? I'm a business owner and I want to increase my enterprise value, right?
Mhm.
What is a couple of practical things that I can do that will make that change in a positive way?
Okay. Well, for example, some of those changes might come from, again, looking at where the risks are in the company. A lot of this
Mhm.
revolves around risk analysis.
Yep.
So if I'm a hypothetical buyer coming in to buy a company, then what I'm looking for is great, you have a lot of money in sales. Sales have been stable, let's just say, as an example. Expenses have been stable, stable margins on revenue, and cash flow has been good. But if there's a lot of underlying risk in those cash flows, then ultimately, as a buyer, I need to assess that risk and put that and build it into my pricing.
Mhm.
So everyone's probably heard the old adage from their investment advisor, right? Blue chip stocks, large companies that have less risk, you're going to get, you know, um, these are probably some older numbers, but let's say 7 or 8% returns. We'll just use that as an illustration.
Yeah.
Whereas you start going into small capitalization companies and small stocks or high growth stocks because they're growing companies, they exhibit a lot more risk. Cash flow is a lot tighter. Their
Mhm.
returns come from capital appreciation, not dividends. And as a result, because there's a lot more risk, you expect a much higher return out of those companies, like 14, 15, 20%. As a
Yes.
result, maybe the overall market blends out on the indexes at, whatever for a return
Mhm.
for the year. So the idea of risk and return is a very basic concept in the world of corporate finance. So if I'm a buyer coming in, I need to price the risk in as to what I'm willing to pay for the business, because if something blows up in the business after the business owner leaves,
Yeah.
then I bear that risk after signing the contracts and taking the company over. So
Mhm.
the key here is in risk analysis. And so some of the drivers might be, can the business owner go on vacation for a month and not get any phone calls, and his employees are taking care of everything and able to make decisions and resolve issues with the customers without him? If the business owner is so inextricably linked to the company that he can't be on vacation for 3 days without taking phone calls, that's a sign of a problem.
Yeah.
Is there customer concentration? Is the 60% of revenue come from one customer, and that customer has a personal relationship with the business owner because they've been old high school buddies, and as a
Yeah.
result, if that business owner left and the company had no further reason to do business with that company that I'm potentially buying, and it became an issue of just purely price or some other factor, what's the risk that I'll lose that 60% of my revenue after I
Mhm.
close the business within 12 months?
Yeah.
So other things might be key employees. It's not always just a business
Mhm.
owner, but what about key employees? Do we have really key people who have a lot of intrinsic knowledge in this industry and company that have worked for the company for 40 years, but now they're 67 and had 2 heart attacks?
Yeah.
And the company hasn't been able to replace the employee yet or train someone up under him. Well, guess what? If I'm the buyer coming in, I'm not going to be happy about him taking a 3rd heart attack that year, and all of a sudden I lose all that intrinsic knowledge, and I've got a serious business disruption that goes on while I own the company. So stability in the company's operations is a key element, and that's why sometimes people might say, well, the company's worth 5, 8, 10, 15 million, and the numbers go back and forth. It's because there are risk items that are being perceived that may or may not be getting addressed.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's an exercise that any business owner can start doing, is a de-risking exercise, right? And it starts right with insurances. Hey, do we have key man insurance? Do we Do we have customer concentration? If so, let's get to diversifying that sooner than later. Right?
Correct.
These are all things that they can put in play easier than human capital, right? Oh, hey, we need somebody at top level on the leadership team. It's a $250,000 a year employee with benefits. You got to plan strategically for that, right? That's a budgeted item for sure, right?
Correct.
But there's other things that can be put in play. All right, great. How should owners think about the timing of their first formal valuation? And the reason I'm asking that question is, do they think about it? Is this just something regular that they should do as part of owning a business, or should they only think about it when they're getting ready to sell?
No, my take with that question is that it's never too early or too soon to get a valuation. And here's why. I've been doing this over 25 years, and my experience with business owners is that they typically think that their company is worth anywhere from 20 to 30% more than it is. And the fact of the matter is, the sooner you have your bubble burst and you stop pretending that you know what the value might be because and I've heard these stories, so these are not, these are anecdotal stories from reality. This is not, any level of sarcasm, but maybe, I had a client one time, had a conversation with his buddy in the same industry over cocktails one night, and, somebody's got a journal from their professional or industry trade, and it says, companies typically sell for 5 times EBITDA, which is earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. Well, just because that's the general rule of thumb that a broker might price a business does not mean that that's what your company is worth. Because we don't know what the inherent assumptions are that are built into that 5 times EBITDA multiple. So there's a whole host of assumptions that goes into applying multiples like that. And if your company does not align with those assumptions, those deviations cause discrepancies. And so someone might walk around thinking their company's worth 10 million. And then when they have an actual formal appraisal done and they get told it's worth 6, they're like, oh my God, by the time I pay taxes, my CPA is telling me I'm going to pay, and I work this around and fund my retirement, I don't know if I can make it through my retirement because I want to travel the world when I'm retired. And that's not cheap. But the reality is the sooner you get it done, the better. And I would say at a minimum, at least 5 to 7 years before you plan on exiting. And you might say, well, that's a long time. Why so long? Because a lot of these types of levers or issues that drive risk are not easily corrected. I mean, it would be great if they were, and we could just treat them like, go into Home Depot and picking up some lumber. Yeah. But it's not that simple. If you've got personnel issues, like the example I used of someone who's been there 40 years, it's a manager role, and has had some health issues and needs to be replaced. It might take a while to find someone, get them trained, and make the transition and convert that person into another role and have someone else take over as the manager position. So these things can take years to straighten out. And then once they take years to resolve and straighten out and reduce owner dependence, strategically change customer concentration issues and work them out, once they're worked out, you still need, in my opinion, 1 to 2 years of business performance in the rearview mirror that reflect all of the changes to solidly state to either an appraiser or a business buyer that these are what our new performance metrics and what our operation looks like, and all of our risk issues have gone away. Otherwise, you're going to leave money on the table by not having the complete effect of all those things reflected in your financial statements.
Yeah, absolutely. When I work with business owners and companies, I'd say it's a 3 to 5 year process, right? When they're thinking about selling. By the time we work on the operating system and we start to strengthen those 4 intangible capitals and get the right people sitting in the right seats and de-risk, and then you get those few years of runway that show the improvement of everything that you've done, you're sitting at that 5 year mark for sure. So
Correct.
In order to get the value that you should as a business owner. and or could, right? Yeah.
Correct. And sometimes what's also people don't realize is that when these things happen and you're in the middle of a structured deal and it's to another buyer who's using bank financing, whether it's SBA backed or not, and the bank wants a formal business valuation, they're going to come to someone like me, and you could have a buyer who's got deep pockets, and they may say, well, regardless of all these things, I just still want to buy the company, and I'll pay, let's say for round numbers, let's say 10 million for the company.
Yeah.
Then a business valuation professional comes in, like myself, and identifies some things, and I say the company's worth 8 million. Well, the SBA is going to say, we'll guarantee and we'll back the debt up to 80% of Ralph's number, the 8 million, not 80% of 10 million. So as a result, someone else is coming up with the rest of the cash to close this deal at 10 million, because you guys can steal the deal at whatever number you want, but we as a bank are not paying for it, and the SBA is not going to guarantee it. So those variables, come into play, and sometimes they're shocks to business owners when they're trying to structure deals. So it's always good to know that, deals can close for whatever you want them to close for, but it's not going to be on the bank's dime, because the business appraiser is still going to have the largest stick in the room.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Excellent. All right. As we wind down, I ask all my guests this one final question, Ralph, and that is, what's the one most important thing you recommend business owners do to build value in their business? If they only could choose one, what would it be?
I would say, if you're looking at your own business operation, and this would be a universal one, regardless of whether your company is dependent or not dependent on you, the business owner. But look at your team, look at your employees, and make sure you have the right people in the right seats, and make sure that you survey your employees. Firm culture used to be something that, in the corporate mentality days, is that people are expendable and you can just replace them. Anybody can do this job. But when you have motivated employees who love what they do, and even if it's a routine thing, that's not something that is glorious by any nature, even receptionists, if they love their job and they love who they work with, and they just feel comfortable and valued as a human being, and company culture is good, and you've surveyed your employees and they aren't disgruntled about anything, maybe health benefits that are lousy, or the coffee in the kitchen's terrible and we need to get better coffee in the office, whatever it is, they're going to stay there. And when you have a team that is motivated and engaged, they're going to help do their part in creating a valuable company, regardless of what that is. And if business owners could tackle that one issue, it would reflect itself in even customer satisfaction, increased revenue, and the like.
Yeah, increased profit. It falls to the bottom line, for sure, right? You don't have people checked out. Yeah. So I tell people all the time that it will be the people issues that will hold you back the most, right? We have to fix, if you have people issues, we need to address that first, for sure.
Correct.
Excellent. Ralph, again, thank you so much. This has been a very comprehensive, in-depth podcast, and I really appreciate your expertise.
You're welcome, Amy. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yes.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. This is the Maximize Business Value podcast, where we give practical advice to business owners on how to build long-term sustainable value for your business. Be sure to tune in each week, subscribe to our channel so you won't miss a single episode. See you next week.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Maximize Business Value podcast. I hope today's conversation sparked new ideas on how you can continue driving value in your business. But remember, it's not just about listening. It's about taking massive action. Visit our website, masterypartners.com, for more resources. Grab a copy of any of the books in the Maximize Business Value series on Amazon or via the links below. And don't hesitate to reach out if you want to know how to apply these concepts to your business. So until next time, I'm Tom Bronson, reminding you to relentlessly execute while you maximize business value.